All right, everyone, welcome in. This is an information session for folks interested in possibly applying to the University of Washington Master of Human-Computer Interaction and Design program for folks starting in fall 2025 with graduation year of 2026, which is amazing to say. Thank you all for coming in, and we look forward to spending a little time with you, saying what we know about this program and introducing you to some of the reasons why we do the things that we do here. We've got a pretty straightforward agenda for the day. We're going to do a little bit of introducing ourselves here. Then we'll talk about the program from a high level of what our mission and the like are in this program. We'll talk more detail about the curriculum and how we put that all together for your year here in the program. Talk a little bit about career outcomes on the other end of the program and what we do to prepare you for that. And then after a little bit about admissions themselves, we're going to get to the fun part of the program. I think the students talking about their experience and what they've seen so far as students in this program. And then we'll end with a good length of time to answer questions along the way. Feel free to use chat to put questions in as we go, and then we can circle back and do live question and answers at the end as well. So to start things off, though, we mentioned this as we were letting you into the in from the waiting room. In chat, if you haven't seen it, we're encouraging folks to just put a little introduction of where you're coming from, just to give us a sense of where our community is today, how we all are hanging out in different parts of the world as this goes on. So feel free to introduce yourself in the chat along the way. This is our group of hosts for the day. So from the staff side of things, we'd like to introduce the three of us who are hosting you here. I've been talking all the time. I'm Matt Bartels, the Assistant Director of Student Services. You'll hear more from me in a bit as well. Our director of our MHCI+D program and professor in the Human-Centered Design and Engineering department is Ana Pinto da Silva.
Hi, everybody.
Here, hello.
Hello, hello. So good to see you.
And then third in our group is Michelle Barreto. She's our graduate advisor. And Michelle will be chatting with you before. Cool. Hello there. We also have a group of student hosts as well, and you'll be seeing them along the way talking and especially chatting in chat early on here. So joining us from the current student cohort, we have Christian Chang, Sophia Syed, Ainsley Tam, and J.U. You'll get to know these four along the way here, and they're a great source of experience who have been here with us, living through what we say we're doing in this program. So glad to have them along with us today. So let's talk a little bit about the program and how we've got this set up. And first, to get things started, I'd like to reintroduce Ana Pinto da Silva, our program director, to talk a little bit about MHCI+D.
All right. Thank you all so much. First of all, I just want to say what an absolute honor it is to have time with all of you this afternoon. For some of you, it might actually be morning as well. In our program, we really, we think about the MHCID, the Masters of Human-Computer Interaction and Design. But really, when we think about each of those letters and what they mean, the H is the most important one. And that means the human beings that not only create the community that we're part of, our learning and leadership community, but all of you as prospective students coming from around the world, choosing to spend time with us this afternoon. I know everybody's really busy. And I want to honor that this is a very important time in your lives, that you're contemplating making a huge decision to change everything and come and join us for a journey around the sun for the better part of a year to gain a master's in human computer and design, a master's degree from the University of Washington. So I just want to underscore what an honor it is and what a privilege it is to be with you all. At MHCID, as you can see on the slide, we prepare leaders who intentionally draw from different disciplines to practice critical optimism and how computer interaction and design approach practice. You know, what does this all mean? It means that we create a community of learnership and of leadership, and we learn together. One of the most fascinating things about the world of technology is how dynamic it is. The moment that you're an expert is the moment before you become someone who doesn't really know what they're doing. To have a career in technology is really to become an expert at not knowing things and learning how to find them out, at being uncomfortable and staying uncomfortable as long as you can, at developing a community of practice and community of friendship that can be alongside you as you learn and grow together, not just in your master's program, but in the careers that you create after the program. So I guess you could go to the next slide if you wanted to, Matt. So our vision is to create graduates that create equitable, ethical, interactive systems to enhance well-being, considering the needs of human societies and, of course, also the environment. That is an incredible vision, but it's very, very difficult to do, as you all know, and as you can imagine, right? Even the promise of AI, just just looking at it from a very basic point of view, already brings up huge ethical and environmental questions. We're being faced with the types of questions and a magnitude of the importance of our answers in a way that our technology community has never before faced. And so time inside the program really means contemplating these big questions while gaining both the technical and professional skills to navigate a powerful career, an impactful career after your time in the program. So MHCID is a part of what's called the UW ecosystem. So UW stands for Design, Use, Build. And the University of Washington's technology community is famous because of its design, use, build community. Formally, the design, use, build community is comprised of 4 partner schools. Those schools are the Division of Design, the Allen School of Computer Science, HCDE, which is my home department, and the Information School. These 4 programs, about 12 years ago, got together and they founded a master's degree, and that's the MHCID degree. We are essentially the only UW master's program at the University of Washington. It's a really unique position to be in. It means that we work in deep partnership with these 4 amazing units to create an educational experience that is, again, centered on learning and leadership and impact as we create careers that have real meaning moving forward from our time in the program together. I don't know if you want to go to the next slide. So Matt, do you want to walk us through the curriculum, or do you want me to take point on that? Either way.
I'll go for a bit on curriculum.
Yeah,
Feel
you
free to
do it.
interrupt at any point, and we'll tag team as we go along. So when we talk about the curriculum, I think it's good to give some sort of structural bits, and Anna began to mention some of this already. Overall, our program is structured. It's got a pretty straightforward structure, a 1-year program. So that 1 year around the sun that Anna mentioned, you're here for 11 months. You come in September, you graduate the following August. It's a full-time program, mostly, but not exclusively, but mostly a daytime program. This means that it's not a work-compatible program. When you're looking at your options, this is a program that we're looking for folks who are diving in for a pretty solid, intensive year of study and progress while you're in the program. Our typical cohort size is around 40 to 45 students. That's each year we have a cohort about that size. The current cohort has 42 students in it. We have a dedicated studio space. If you could see us now, actually we've moved upstairs into small conference rooms today, but the downstairs studio space is the home for you during the year of this program. And that's a really nice benefit when you're in a program like this, that there's a spot that's dedicated for MHCID students to be in, and you have 24/7 access. You can come in and work on projects 7 days a week, whenever you want to be here. There aren't other classes being offered in the space, so it's our space to make use of. And it really becomes a valuable home base that helps to shape the way that we approach this year. Final point on the program structure is that we use the cohort model as the model that we instruct in. And when we talk about the cohort model, it's worth unpacking that a little bit because it's so essential to how we run through the curriculum for the year. Basically, as a cohort program, we find it valuable that most of the courses that you'll take throughout this year are going to be with your cohort mates. So you're not coming into one class with a group of some students that you'll never see again, and then another class with other students that you'll never see again. You're going to be spending most of this year with your cohort when you're here. About 39 of the 46 credits that you'll be needing to take to graduate are all in courses with all of the cohort together. That's your core group. You're with the core group for most of your experience here. We work primarily through a series of group projects in the work that we do in studio classes, especially in capstone. So you'll be doing a lot of collaborative work within the cohort. Collaboration and working with your classmates is an essential part of how we learn and how we act in this program. This is something that is easier or harder for different individuals, but it's something that's fairly much essential for you going into the workspace after graduation, is to learn to be a good collaborator with others. So we think that's a really valuable element of the cohort model. Altogether, this cohort model and the interdisciplinarity of that DUB intersecting Venn diagram, this interdisciplinarity and the cohort model, we think those are kind of at the heart of how we put together the curriculum for understanding what we're teaching. Then moving on from here, I want to talk about the courses that you take throughout the year. There's several different types of courses. We'll talk through the calendar next, but basically everybody will be taking these types of courses throughout your time in the program. First is the DUB seminar. The DUB seminar is a course that happens every single quarter, and that's organized around a speaker series where we bring in experts from industry and from the academy to talk about their latest work. It's a chance to be introduced to some of the cutting edge ideas on fields directly related to HCI and to help you understand what people are doing in industry. You know, every year you'll see folks from places like Microsoft Research, places like Google, folks from different departments in different schools coming over from whether it's Georgia Tech or CMU or other parts of the University of Washington. You get to hear speakers and then have discussions with them through the discussion sections in the DUB seminar. This speaker series becomes a way to introduce you to the various different ideas every quarter throughout the year. In addition, the DUB seminar is a community building location where we come together with other folks at the university, PhD students and professors who are interested in the same HCI field. The DUB seminar is kind of our meeting place where you can have a chance to collaborate and work with folks in the HCI field at the University of Washington. So DUB seminar, that's one thing that you'll take every quarter. There's also a series of theory seminars that you take through 3 of the 4 quarters of the year. These seminars are a chance to dive, usually with a little bit more lecture and a little less project work, and to dive in the theories behind what we do, understanding in a little more detail and depth why we're putting together projects, the way that we put them together, and how we approach technology. You'll see the different themes for those as we break down the calendar year here. The theory course, the seminar courses are complemented by studio courses. Every quarter, you'll take a studio course. The studio course complements the theory side by being more about doing than about the theory side. You're still going to have lectures from professors, but you'll have fewer lectures and more time spent working on a project. The studio courses are where typically the entire quarter, you'll be broken up into small groups, and you'll have a prompt, often a pretty vague and broad prompt that guides the whole quarter's work that says approach a topic, and each team will take a different angle on that and come through an end-to-end project working on it. For example, this quarter, the ideation studio is got a broad mandate to work on intergenerational design. So design across the generations. I'm sure that's taking each team in wildly different directions. So it's not a super confining prompt, but it's a prompt that guides the discussions that you have in those studio courses. Along with this, there's a capstone process. The capstone process, you'll see in the calendar, runs through 3 of our 4 quarters. Capstone is essentially a large studio class. Each capstone team is a small group project again, where you're matched with an industry advisor. Some of these are industry advisors who come in with their own project defined that they want you to work on. Others of these are open for you to define the area. And there's a learning process to decide which of those you prefer to do, which part of the design process you want to really dive into. The capstone process lasts begins in the winter quarter and then expands to do more research in the spring. And then summer quarter is heavily focused on working on your capstone project. That capstone project is kind of the summation of all the work that you put together that you've learned in theory classes and seminars, and you've learned in studio classes. So that brings it all together. The final sort of icing on the cake as you go through this are electives. Electives are one place where you won't be with the full cohort. You'll be with other graduate students and undergraduate students, sometimes even primarily from the 4 departments that are our sponsoring departments, but sometimes from other places. We have students taking electives in the business school with MBA students taking electives in some of our other neighboring departments. Electives are a chance to sort of specialize go into further depth in something that you want to make part of what you brand your own personal design expert as you're going out of this program. How this all comes together throughout the year, you can kind of see this as we build it up here. We start off even before autumn quarter with an immersion studio. This is a 1-week intensive week where the whole cohort comes together for the first time and gets introduced to what the cohort experience is like and what some of the opportunities are. Sometimes this is framed as a design sprint. Sometimes this is framed as a chance to get to meet with some of the amazing resources that you can find around this University of Washington and Seattle area. We have speakers coming in, running workshops with us, and really introducing in a blistering pace all the different ways that you can interact with design in the year to come. So it's that introductory week that comes in, and then we move into autumn quarter. Autumn quarter, your studio class is ideation studio, with more of a focus on some of those early parts of the design process where you're coming up with ideas and learning how to down select, but you still do follow that through into the design stages of a project, but a little more emphasis early on in ideation. The theory course for autumn quarter is user research. This gives you an introduction to different methods of research, different strategies and ethical questions involved in conducting research. And then autumn quarter, you'll also have Dub seminar and you might have an elective. Winter quarter comes into play. There we have prototyping studio. So prototyping studio is another end-to-end group project. The emphasis in prototyping studio is on externalizing, on building out real world tools, especially for creating prototypes and testing. So you'll be using all sorts of different methods to move from the digital space into the real world to create things that can really be embodied in the real world. And projects will focus on things like, for example, creating an installation. Last year, the students in Prototyping Studio were building walk up and play installations dealing with a social issue, something that you could imagine being installed in a museum, perhaps, something like that. The seminar course that we take in winter quarter is User Interfaces, Software, and Technology. This is a course to really be introduced to the various different modes of interfaces and talk about the theory behind how different interfaces come together. In addition, you'll see a new box on the winter quarter slide there is capstone planning. In winter quarter, you begin talking about capstone. So the capstone planning class has you beginning to form teams and identify the industry advisors that you want to work with for the year. That team formation and beginning the work of figuring out what your problem space is going to be for capstone begins as early as January and February in winter quarter. Spring comes in and we continue on with the same structure. The studio class in spring quarter is for your capstone. So your capstone teams and broad area have been defined. Now you do the research. The studio class is all about conducting the research you need for your capstone project. You'll have already been introduced to research methods in the fall quarter in that theory course, but this is about using the right methods for your problem space and really understanding what would be the best approach to really dive deep and become the area experts for whatever topic you're refining in your capstone. At the same time, the theory course in spring quarter is called Designing Interactive Systems. This is a class to really ask you to now reflect back a bit and problematize some of the whys of why we're doing what we're doing, and to kind of ask about, with a critical lens, how is it that we're designing and what's good or dangerous about the way that we're approaching our designs that we're creating and our projects that we're working on. It's generally a class that you do a lot of critical thinking about how we're doing the design that we're doing. Come summer quarter, it's all capstone pretty much. Summer quarter is really a sprint to the end where you're focused on executing the design for your capstone projects. You can really get in depth there, and you want to be coming out of this showing some of your best work of what you're capable of when you can focus fully on this project. I haven't mentioned it in the last few quarters, but you have Dub seminar through every quarter down at the bottom. That was continuing. That's a constant. And you have electives along the way as well. Not necessarily every quarter, but often 2 or 3 of the 4 quarters, you'll have an elective throughout the year. This is the schematic of how we put together the year. This is what your year here can look like. And we think there's a pretty good logic to the way we structured things. It's a pretty intensive year. As we start talking to students, I think you'll get a sense of that, but you'll be busy throughout this year. There's a lot to learn and a lot to do as you become a deeper and deeper expert in the field as you move through this all. Something else that we thought could be useful would be to talk a little bit from all of us about when we're thinking about what makes up a great cohort. Our students are pretty awesome. You're going to be introduced to them momentarily here. But what do we think of when we think of who might be right for this program? And we've thrown a few ideas together on here. I'd invite Anna, Michelle to come in at any point and sort of like, if there's one of these you want to talk about, these are some points that we've thought of as like, who might be right for the program?
I'd love for Michelle to jump in and just put some love out there, and then we can amplify from there. Michelle, you want to take it away?
Yeah, I'm kind of looking even through some of these questions right here. I might even just take a good tackle at the first 2 here. Curious and thoughtful about people and technology, and self-directed and driven. I think those especially resonate. I think part of being a master's student is being self-directed and really asking the questions of around, what do you feel you would gain out of a master's degree? What are you hoping to amplify in your learning and your professional identity? And I think part of that is curiosity as well. I think a lot of times it's less important to come in having all the answers and knowing exactly what you do, but more about just being open to the process, and just sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and just being open to that and sort of allowing, it's not to say not being thoughtful, but sometimes allowing the process to take you down a path that you may not have intended. Sometimes things will come up, and especially this is the time to explore with, there's a little bit less maybe guardrails than a professional setting might be, and explore topics that are interesting to you or industries that are interesting. So yeah, I think that's kind of my big thoughts on those first 2 points.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. I think I've talked a bit about being eager to work in the studio and cohort models here. I don't know if we have anything we want to add to that, but That is really important. If you're someone who's like looking for a hide away alone and do your own research and report back and learn from your own studies to yourself, that kind of one-on-one approach, I would hesitate to hop into a cohort because it's a different model. So that would be the kind of thing that I would hope that's appealing to you because you lean heavily into that in this program. Goes without saying, I think willing to dedicate a full year, both in time and finances. This is a big undertaking. It's only 1 year, but it is a big undertaking. So we're looking for people who know what they're getting into when they're coming in here. Anna, do you have any thoughts on any of these, but especially these last 2 points, an impulse towards creation and a sense of purpose?
Oh, golly, gosh, thanks.
Put you on the spot.
No, I mean, you know me too well. Thank you for this. And
Just guessing.
yeah, I really love this list. I think it's a really, really wonderful list. And, we think about all of the qualities that are here: curiosity, thoughtfulness, directedness, self-directedness, having a sense of focus. And I think that's, you can think about the word driven from that perspective. An eagerness and an appetite for collaboration. And that doesn't mean always being joined at the hip with every single person here at all times. We encourage you to step in and step out of your collaboration, and also to have time for, all of the instructors know it's really important for us to confront the self and have individual work that complements our ability to come into collaborations and then practice together. Just an additional note on that. The cohort model is extremely powerful because, you have instructors, faculty, you have industry instructors, you have an incredible staff that does a lot of co-curricular work with you. But in addition to that, the cohort becomes its own teacher. And essentially that's actually really true. In a way, the teaching community are there to give an inspirational scaffolding for the students, but it's really the students in many ways who teach themselves through the guidance and the inspiration and the energy that the teaching community writ large create for the program. And that's why being self-directed is very important. That's why having, again, a sense of purpose, and I want to talk about that for a moment. If the only reason you want to do MHCID is to get a great job at Google, I don't think this is the right program for you. And it's not to say that you won't get a great job at Google as a result of being in the program. It's just that knowing, having worked at Microsoft and Amazon and knowing many, many friends and colleagues who are at Google and Meta and so forth, in order to survive in those environments and in order to have a really meaningful career in technology, you have to have a sense of purpose that is much greater than any employer. It really has to come from within. It really has to be about wanting to use technology as a force for good, as a means of exploring what is possible and what could be and what will be. I mean, I want to also center courageous criticality, which is a very important value that we have at MHCID. Just quick show of hands on this call, like who here would resonate with the word overwhelmed? Like, is anybody here a little bit generally overwhelmed in their lives? Like, I'm just going to say yes. I'm completely overwhelmed by the way that we work today. It's quite honestly, it's like killing me, right? Like how many Slack channels we need to be on, this constant, never-ending stream of email, the 48 different, interfaces and systems that we need to navigate on any given day, the cell phone, the text messages that are coming in. We're kind of like at peak 2020, right? If you think about the ethos, the set point that many of these technologies were created 10, 15 years ago, 5 years ago, they're centered on a vision of productivity that has now been empowered by the potential of computation and amplified by AI in a way that we can't actually maintain in terms of pace. So what does that mean for us as a master's program? It means that we're at an inflection point as a technology community where we really literally have to reimagine technology in such a way that it is in fact humane and tenable and reasonable, and brings forward new visions about what it means to be productive and creative and purpose-driven that don't kill us, right, in the act of doing. And this is a huge, heavy lift. What I'm telling you right now is going to define the arc of your professional lives for the next 20 years. Coming up with a credible thesis about how we want to engage technology in a more productive and humane way is an enormously heavy and inspiring lift. And by the way, we haven't talked about yet what it means to create systems that are in fact equitable. And by the way, don't impact the planet in the way that the current technologies that we use do. So having a sense of purpose is really critical, because doing this work is in fact very hard. Even when you get that dream job, rest assured one day you will be laid off, right? You will find a moment where there's, a big pivot or inflection point in the industry, and you and half your colleagues are now with badges that no longer work, right? What do you do then, right? It's a very difficult career. It goes through these major inflection points, these ups and downs: community, purpose, humility, service. These are all very, very important values that help you navigate the highs and lows, such that you create a career and, more crucially, a life that you're proud of and that actually brings meaning into the world. The last thing I'll say, and I'll say this in closing, is that it is really a privilege to do this work. And there's a lot of privilege that's embedded inside the work in ways that are fair and deeply, deeply unfair. And so we talk a lot about these things. We think a lot about these things. We think about how we dismantle systems and recreate systems. So again, it's an honor to be part of the program. Certainly an honor to be part of this call, because all of you are people of purpose, surely, otherwise you wouldn't have made time to be on this call today. And you're at a moment where you're really trying to figure out what's right for you, what's that next most elegant step that's going to allow you to live your best life, to fulfill that purpose that you feel within you. And so those are some of the things that we look at too when we look at bringing a cohort together. And I will say, and I know Matt and Michelle, and I'd love for you to step in on this. We take a lot of care when it comes to building a cohort. And we're in the West Coast and the sun is in fact setting here. Not just an inspiring moment, but we take a lot of care with our cohort. We really, again, it's just such a privilege to be with students during the year that they're with us, and we want to give our very best to them and create a learning environment that really helps them amplify the skills and promise that they each carry. So Matt and Michelle and our students too, I'd love to hear from you about some of the comments that we've laid down.
I would be happy for anyone who wants to speak up in the panel here. We can talk here, but we can also catch it more later too. I think I'll just move ahead a little bit here. We're about to get to the student section, so y'all can cogitate on this a little bit and think if there's anything that you want to add as we get to the student section as well.
And I'm actually thinking too, and as we move along in the next slides too, we're going to be getting into the conversation of admissions and thinking about like some of the pieces you're speaking to on, I think even thinks about like, what is that story that you're bringing into the admissions process? So I actually think it's a great segue too.
Cool. Well, we're going to talk briefly next about the other end of the process. So you're coming into this program, you've got a sense of what it looks like, and we'll hear more about it from the students in just a few minutes. Wanted to talk just briefly about how we prepare you for the careers on the other side. First and foremost, how we prepare you for the careers on this side is through the program itself. The students will get tired of hearing me say this as we go through the year, But the best way that you can do career development during this year is to get the most that you can out of the curriculum, out of the projects that you work on and the collaboration and the opportunities to meet with these speakers and these industry folks from around here. That's your biggest asset when it comes to developing your career. We do other things though as well. So within the program, we have a series of workshops that we offer, these co-curricular workshops that have to do with all elements of the job search. I focus primarily on helping out with elements of the job interview process. So we'll do workshops on building your resume, we'll do workshops on the screening interview, behavioral interview questions, how to answer a whiteboard challenge questions. We have a dedicated spring course on portfolio building, how to tell your stories in your portfolio, how to build your portfolio. That's an elective that's taught by a creative director at one of the local design agencies, Teague. He comes in, he spends most of his time in his career, a lot of, not most, but a lot of his time in his career reviewing portfolios and interviewing folks, giving portfolio presentations. So he has a lot of industry experience that's really valuable as you're putting your portfolio together. In addition, we draw on our alumni quite a bit when it comes to career development. We hold career panels or alumni panels throughout the year, especially towards the end of the year, the last 2 quarters, where we bring alumni back around different themes to talk about their experience. You know, it's just several years in advance of where you are in the program, to hear what it's like to be in a certain slice of the industry. So we might have a panel of all UX researchers. Maybe there's a panel of all folks working in design agencies, alumni all at a single company, like a Google panel or a Microsoft panel. Those are really helpful to give you a slice of alumni who have experienced what you've experienced in the program and now are living it in the world. So you can learn what to focus on, what their tips are, and the like. Workshops, alumni panels. In addition to that, one-on-one meetings with any of the staff along the way and your instructors, those can be really valuable. You'll be coming in probably quarterly for a dedicated meeting with Anna to discuss where you are in the program and what your goals are moving forward, what your overall trajectory is. You'll be meeting with me regularly, especially as you get into the meat of the job search. We meet with people all the time on whatever they're up to and wherever they are in the process. Beyond us, of course, there are advantages to being in Seattle and at the University of Washington. The University of Washington is a large school with a dedicated career and internship center. Of course, it's mostly focused on the undergraduate experience, but it has workshops every day on different elements of career development. So you can also take advantage of those and those larger career fairs that happen. Those are available. Seattle is one of the best places to be in an environment that focuses on the HCI field pretty carefully. The Bay Area is the biggest area for working in HCI. The second biggest zone is Seattle. Between Microsoft and Amazon and large presences for Meta and Google and several other large companies, medium-sized companies, that has created an environment that has then spawned a series of smaller companies as well that have understood the value of this HCI field and how that can aid in the development of products along the way. So it's a great place to be interested in these topics. There are people who speak your language hanging out just around town in Seattle. So it's one of the big advantages for career development is just location here. A couple of very brief slides to give you an idea of where our students end up. Alumni locations, not surprisingly, most of our alumni are here in Seattle. A good number are down in the Bay Area. And then over on the East Coast, we've got a fairly strong group of alum in New York City and other places on the East Coast. Job titles are not very surprising. About 2/3 of the alumni from the program are working in something that is probably like a designer title, something like UX or IX designer or product designer. A smaller number are UX researchers, and 10% or a little bit more are working more directly in leadership these days. Hiring speed. These are very broad categories, but we like to track historically how rapidly after graduation students have found their next role. The overall trends for our program over time has been to have about 2/3 of our alumni hired within 3 months of graduation. And then by the time we're at 6 months after graduation, we're up a bit around 90%. That's been the general trend. If you've been following the field at all, you know there was a big crackdown about a year and a half ago where a lot of hiring freezes took place and a lot of layoffs happened. These happen periodically in every field, so all of us will see them multiple times in our careers. But we put together dedicated numbers for the most recent cohort that we have figures on, just to give you like an open view. To 2023, the class of 2023 is the most recent one that we have numbers on. With that, the hiring speed was slower, not surprisingly. This was in the heart of the slowdown and the closing of job opportunities. We keep working with these students nearly every day. And instead of 90% or 85, 90% by 6 months, we were at about 60%. So it was a much slower hiring rate in the 2023 year. We're waiting to find out how the 2024 cohort is going to turn out. Seems to be moving more rapidly than 2023, but stay tuned. We're going to find out as well. So it's a different market out there, but there still are opportunities, and we're still seeing people getting hired pretty regularly. I think from here, we're going to move into the other end of your timeline. So we've talked about where you might end up if you go through this program. Now, Michelle's going to talk a little bit about some of the pieces of admissions that you might need to pay attention to. Michelle.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Matt. And I'll keep this pretty brief. And at the end of the day, I would recommend that for any very specific questions about admissions materials, to look at our website. And if something is still unclear, to contact us directly. Now this is our primarily the time where we're getting emails on specifics. For example, if you have some concerns about your GPA or your English language proficiency tests, if we have time at the end, the Q&A, we can potentially touch base on it. But generally, I would say if it's very specific to you, I recommend either going to the website first to see if the answer is answered there, or then touching base with us. Some of these things might be very specific to your situation. But generally for admissions, there's going to be an application fee of about $90. That is going to be through the application itself. And we use a system called Slate. And so if you're in any sort of admissions, if you're applying to other institutions, you'll likely see this same format throughout the different institutions. In terms of requirements, we do request an unofficial transcript showing a 3.0 minimum GPA from a 4-year accredited institution, 3 letters of recommendation. It can be from either industry professionals or faculty. It doesn't need to be like one or the other. A good mix can be really great to demonstrate your breadth of experiences, but it's really about selecting 3 strong recommenders, a resume or a CV. No preference there. It's just based on what the document best reflects your body of work, and a statement of purpose, which an updated description of it is going to be both available on our website as well as in the actual application itself. And this is definitely like a really big, important piece of the admissions process, and really thinking through, as you're going through everything, just being very thoughtful and intentional about these materials, especially with the statement of purpose. In the application, you are able to work on materials outside and then have a draft version within your application. But then once it gets submitted, it is locked. I would really recommend just making sure to take the time from now to January 15th to make sure that everything's just nice and polished. And one other piece is that we really highly recommend is an additional materials section. And I really would recommend that you submit something. It is optional, but highly recommended. It does not necessarily have to be just a portfolio. There are other materials that you can submit. It's more about having artifacts or materials that best demonstrate you as a student, as an applicant, and as a future member of MHCID. So it does not necessarily need to be a portfolio. And if you are someone who's especially coming from a different industry, I really would encourage you to think about what material best demonstrates you as an applicant, rather than maybe trying to do a portfolio that you feel is pretty mediocre and it isn't really reflective of your best work. Wonderful. I think we can go to the next slide here. Yeah, so oh, I do see some questions. I'm going to go through this next section and then see if we can quickly answer it. And so in terms of international applicants, you will have a few additional requirements as well. You will need to demonstrate English language proficiency, either through test scores such as TOEFL, IELTS, or Duolingo. You must, there's other ways you can do this as well, which includes attending a U.S. undergraduate program or having studied at an institution that's primary mode of instruction was English, which would include providing documentation, providing evidence of that. We do require that you graduate from a 4-year program at an accredited school. And if you are attending a 3-year program, we can talk offline a little bit about what are some other options, but generally we are expecting a 4-year program. And then for students, you do not need to submit through WES or these other programs. You can submit your transcript as is if you attended an international school, and we will convert your GPA to a 4.0 scale. Right. All right, and I want to make sure. Yeah, and so I want to quickly take a look at the questions here. Yeah, so I do see some questions about different types of materials. It can potentially be part of that additional material, such as like artwork, sketchbooks. I will leave a little bit of these spaces about portfolio questions maybe to the students, as they, I think, have more insight about their submission materials and maybe more in the Q&A session, but definitely feel free to continue to add your questions here, and we'll come back to it for sure by the end of it. So costs and finances, I will share that being both a program at the University of Washington and in Seattle particularly, there's going to be certain costs you need to be mindful of if you decide to attend our program, should you be accepted. We are a fee-based program, so for all students, both domestic, Washington-based, and international, the estimated cost for the full year, so 4 quarters, will be about $60,000 US, and I would also plan for an additional $20,000 to $30,000 in the year for living expenses. Seattle is an expensive city. I want to say maybe even like top 10, maybe even top 5 most expensive cities in the United States. So it is something just to keep in mind as you're planning a potential move to the Pacific Northwest. And most students are going to be paying during their time at our program with loans. And while there is some limited student employment, it definitely won't cover the cost of attendance. So it's more just about a supplemental income for a few students who are able to receive these roles. But I would really say in this program, if you're considering this in the context of your budget, plan for loans. And also I would really recommend reaching out to our financial aid office if you're eligible to sort of talk through a little bit what that might look like for you. Graduate programs are typically not subsidized, and scholarships look very different if you've come from U.S. undergraduate education. So it's just being mindful to plan that accordingly. All right. And then admissions timeline, so some big important dates. So the first one is going to be an application deadline of January 15th. We are not rolling admissions, and you submitting earlier does not make your application a higher priority application. If you need the time, take the time. You know, it's really important that you make sure your materials are solid. And so just keep in mind the January 15th deadline. All right, and then we will submit decisions out on March 15th. So between January and March, we are reviewing all of the applications, which is quite a few. And so it's going to be a deliberation time with our reviewers. And we will be sending out decisions promptly on March 15th. And then finally, we will be asking folks to have their decision deadline on April 15th. In any situation where you might need additional time to make a decision, we can, if you are accepted, we can have that conversation then. But we are typically wrapping up and solidify our cohort within April, maybe into May. So it is something just to keep in mind as well as you're planning all of your admissions timelines. Great. Yes. So I do see a quick question about letters of recommendations that I will say that for letters of recommendation, do ask your folks earlier. We do expect that they are completed and submitted by January 15th. That's a great question. So yeah, letters of recommendation request with well enough in advance with an expectation that they are into us by the 15th of January. Right. And I think I will go ahead and transition back to you, Matt, and then to introduce our student panel.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle. That was great. I think it's time to get to our student panel here. And for this, I think for this, I would like to stop the share screen so that we can maybe, instead of having static screens, we might just have our panelists be up on the screen when we do this. So I'm going to stop the share, and then we can ask Christian, Sophia, Ainsley, and Jay to join us on screen. Oops, there we go. All right. So we've got a group of current students here who are happy to talk about what their experience has been so far. And I wanted to start by going around one at a time and asking each of you to sort of introduce yourself and maybe give us a little bit of your background of where you were before you came into MHCID, and maybe just tell us why you chose this program. I imagine some of you had other options in mind or other possibilities. Some of you maybe didn't look anywhere else, but I'm guessing you each have a different story. So a little bit about your background and a little bit about why you made the decision that you did. And I'm going to start with Christian. So Christian is also, many of you might have interactions with Christian during this admissions period. He's serving as our admissions ambassador for the year, as our student ambassador during the program. Christian, welcome in.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Michelle. You guys did a great job with the first part of the presentation. But hi, I'm Christian. I'm from New York / New Jersey. I get to claim both. And a little bit about me. I did my undergrad at a small liberal arts college called Middlebury in New England. And I studied computer science and music there. And then I worked in product at a bank for a couple of years after graduation in 2020. And I specifically came to this program because I thought not only did the cohort model really appeal to me, but also I felt like the design process is explained and practiced a lot throughout a lot of the courses. So it's very much a big part of this program. I think other programs have different aspects of like theory and programming also put into it, but I think the whole design process and mentality is really strong within this program. I'm super excited for your questions, but I'd also like to pass it to some of the other panelists on this call as well. So if we're just going to popcorn, I'm going to go to Ainsley.
Perfect.
Intro.
Hi, I'm Ainsley. I'm from Singapore and I moved to the US about 2 to 3 years ago. For my undergrad, I studied in the UK. I studied law and I was a lawyer for about 2 years before I moved to the US. And after I moved here, I transitioned into UX design. So I did a UX design boot camp and did some internships, and I wanted to learn more, so I applied to the program. Same as Christian, I think the program stood out to me because I really liked the cohort model. I wanted to make connections, get to know people, and I think we have a great cohort. We have very talented people that I'm very eager to learn from. And yeah, I think the design aspect as well, and we have a lot of courses that allow us to do very different things. So I liked that multifaceted approach. Yeah. And I'll pass the time now to Sophia.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Sophia. I'm from the Bay Area, and I graduated from UC Santa Cruz back in 2023. I studied cognitive science with a concentration in AI and HCI. And then I did a gap year where I did UX research at a nonprofit and then did some design work at a startup. And I picked this program, also echoing what Christian and Ainsley mentioned, because of the cohort model. I am so grateful that I get to collaborate with so many talented individuals and also have instructors that are from so many different backgrounds within the industry. And yeah, and I'll pass it to Jay.
Hi everyone, I'm Jay. I'm from Korea and I lived in Japan for almost half of my life actually. So quite a unique background, I'd say. Before coming into this program, actually I studied for my undergrad. I studied political philosophy, so quite different from what I did for my career. But for my career, I was in the tech, focusing on data analytics and support engineering for 5 years in Japan. And yeah, I am here. The reason why I chose MHCID is like what everyone said, the cohort model definitely stood out. And I think us having 42 people is like just the right amount, just number of people to learn from each other and get inspiration. And also, I like the fact that MHCID was 1 year program because like I'm actually experiencing this, but we just dive right into this into this like intensive study. And I really like that idea. And also the Seattle and the Dub, the community is very rich. So I really am enjoying my study here in MHCID.
Awesome. Thank you all. I think we're going to probably come back to ask about to cast your mind back to application materials and the like, because I know there'll be questions about that coming up. But for the first step, I'd be interested in hearing, like, so you've made it here. You're in the program now. You've had some experience here. You're a little more than a month here. How has it been? What have you found like enjoyable? What have you found challenging? And if you can maybe give us some insight onto what sorts of projects you're working on. All we've had is this abstract calendar of course names and the like, but I don't know, what kind of projects are you working on? This can go to anybody first, whoever would like to speak first.
I
That
was
was
just
Ainsley,
waiting
right?
for
Oh, Kristen was
one
getting
of
ready to
you. I was waiting for one of the other participants to go back and go first. I think one of the cool projects that we're working on now that I was actually just telling my sibling about is that the first quarter I feel like is very unique in that we're approaching the design process from a technology agnostic perspective. Like I think our professors are pretty vocal about not trying to just like make an app as a solution. So for example, for our ideation studio, if you saw on the chart, it's one of our core classes. My group is looking at multi-generational spaces and relationships with the backdrop of weddings, right? Because you have a bunch of folks getting married, and they're going to have their parents, their children, they're going to have grandchildren, and we're looking at the relationship that the people getting married and their parents have, and we practice the same kind of like research techniques that you would for creating like a traditional app, but the design philosophy is like still imbued in that process. So I think that's like really cool that you're not like immediately thinking about, oh, like how is like my phone going to get incorporated in this, but just thinking about the practice of the process with like a super unique topic. So that's my cool project to share. Anyone else, feel free to go.
Well, I can go next. Since Christian, he already talked about the ideation, our core class, I could talk about the UXR, user research class, another core class of ours. For our class, we each group got a big theme to explore onto, such as like transportation, game, and etc. And for our group, we got a transportation. So we're currently focusing on e-scooter parking issue. So it has been really fun just because we are actually out in the street, talking to all these like strangers, e-bike riders, asking questions and recruiting them for our in-depth research. So that has been really interesting and really fun just because yeah, like I get to work with other cohort people and be in the field to do in-depth research.
Should I share?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So for Ideation Studio, as Christian mentioned, we're doing multi-generational stuff, and my group is doing focusing on retirement home residents and helping them connect with their adult children. And my group got to visit a retirement home and speak to people, and it was really interesting for me just because I think I'm quite awkward around people, like strangers. But that experience helped me to gain some confidence and also just get to know people and their stories. And as Christian mentioned, we're trying to not think about the tech right now. So this morning we had a group meeting and we were ideating on what possible solutions we can come up with. And I think it was just an interesting experience to see how we could try to be creative outside of tech and create enjoyable experiences without relying on tech. Because I think something that's been emphasized a lot is future-proofing our designs, and tech always evolves, and we shouldn't just think so narrowly within what we have now. Yeah, we should design for the future.
And I can close off really quick.
Mhm.
For my elective, I'm taking the Interfaces Lab, which is an elective I think a lot of HCID students end up taking. But I'm really grateful that we have Michael Smith as an instructor. He gives us live feedback, which is something really unique to his classroom, which has been really great. Being able to have him give us feedback so quickly has been really helpful. And right now, the project we just submitted was an information architecture, like project organization document. So it was interesting to see how like different students interpreted our PRD or product requirement document differently to kind of lay out the early groundworks for their designs.
That's awesome. Thank y'all. I want to open up for your advice. I'm sure a lot of people on this call would be interested in hearing from successful applicants. All of you have done something that Michelle and Anna and I haven't done. You've applied to MHCID's program and gotten accepted. If you're thinking back on what you were putting together a year from now, or a year past, a year ago, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you approached it. Did you all put together a traditional UX portfolio? Did you work on that? What kind of folks did you come up with for your reference letters? I think there's probably some variety just on the call here, and I'd love to hear a couple of takes on sort of what you put together and what you emphasized when you were applying. Because pointing at people always seems to get things moving faster. Christian, go.
Again, I was gonna wait, but okay. I think I was gonna also, I forgot to mention at the beginning of my intro, because I am the admissions ambassador, I welcome all questions, and if you want to meet, I can't promise that I'll be able to meet because this program is pretty intense, but I will leave my email in the chat. I can also get Matt to send out my email. I'd love to answer your questions. But with that, as a starting note, I think I'm a pretty unique person for the application process because I didn't have a traditional UX or design or research portfolio. And had I known that there was like different dynamics in what people were submitting, I would have been like 10 times more intimidated by like thinking about what should be submitted. So I actually submitted for my additional materials a research paper that I conducted in undergrad that I was the lead for, that kind of intersected my degree in computer science and music, but it had the same like core like research tenets that I'm sure that this cohort or this program was looking for, right? Like a very well thought through process of approaching a problem, creating a solution, and then defending it. I think that is a good example of, I think I saw some people ask questions about portfolios, and I would emphasize that even if you don't have a traditional portfolio, your chances of getting into this program are not dashed at all. I think it should be something that you should include something in your application that shows like intentionality and something that you're proud of that you've done, whatever it may be.
I can go next. One piece of advice that I would definitely give everyone is to try to start drafting up your statement of purpose as soon as you can, just to write something down to really map out your own story, like trying to fully understand like why you're applying and just giving yourself that time to really explore that. And also just because there were a lot of questions in the chat about the portfolio, I submitted a traditional website link, so I built my portfolio on Squarespace and had a combination of academic, professional, and um, personal projects as well. So there's a section in my website that's just like pictures of my sketchbook and less formal designs. And then I think the third question was, Matt, can you remind me what the third question was real quick?
Just any general tips and I guess any thoughts about your references? That's something that
Oh,
people asked about, yeah.
yeah. I got one of my former employers to write a letter of recommendation for me, and then two of my professors from undergrad.
I can go next. For additional materials, I submitted a UX like website because I had been transitioning and I was proud of that. So I had two internship projects, two design bootcamp case studies, and one volunteer project, which was like legal UX related because I wanted to show my background as well. Um, and for my letters of recommendation, I reached out to one of my bosses from a law firm, my bootcamp mentor, and an internship boss as well. I think a tip would just be to let your experience shine through your work and what you're uh, showcasing. Like it should correspond and make sense. Although if you are transitioning, it also would be good to just explain it and show how you're taking steps towards your future. Yeah.
So for the admission part, I think I could touch on the two aspects, the statement of purpose and the portfolio part. For statement of purpose, that was the hardest part for me when I was preparing for this program. I say the tip would be to ask yourself, like, is your story answering the question, right? So for me personally, like when I was preparing to write, I wanted to jam as much as I can to show that I can do this, like I have awesome experience, just pick, like, please admit me. But when I went back and reread all my statement, like, well, what am I trying to deliver with this story? Like, what am I trying to, convey the message that I'm trying to answer for my question? So there were the missing points. So try to like look back and see if they connect the dots to the question that the admins are looking for. And also for the portfolio aspect, last year I also attended the webinar that Matt hosted, and Matt said the advice that really helped me was that like, are the points you have mentioned in your personal statement reflected in your portfolio? I think that really hit me like really well. So for me, in my personal statement, I like talked about my data analytics experience and my collaboration aspects to it. So for my portfolio preparation, I also created like a web base, but it was all like my personal passion projects. And they included like UX, UI. Well, they also included like the data analytics project that I did in my previous job, and or like the things that I explore of my own interest, like that shows that I can collaborate with diverse people, like etc. So I think portfolio is like the platform where you can, show what kind of color or the thoughts you want to deliver to the admin. So yeah, I think that's the advice I have for people.
It's awesome. Yeah, I think I'm really appreciative of y'all for coming and joining with some of your experience. I think just by this fairly random selection of cohort mates, you get a feel for some of the breadth that we think makes the program so strong. The backgrounds of each of these folks is very different, but they're folks that bring something to the table, something really interesting from where they come from that makes it like place where I think as you're considering like what you could spend your year with, this would be a fun place to spend a year, I think. interesting folks to be hanging out with for class when you're working those late hours, staying busy, like Christian mentioned, all the time. That's what we're looking for in these cohort experiences that we put together each year. I think I'd like to spend the last bits of time answering questions. All of us in the panel would be happy to answer questions. We can do this a few different ways. You can raise your hand and we can call on you directly. We also have questions in chat, and Michelle and actually all 7 of us can look at those questions as well and say like, hey, here's one we might want to answer. I think several of the questions about portfolio and the like were ones that were covered pretty nicely by the 4 of you in the student section. There's a variety that we would look for there. Michelle, you looked ready to say one. Oh.
Yep. Thank you. I appreciate it. Letting me know I need to unmute myself. Yeah. So I think one other thing I'd like to bring up, just about like the review application process. I think one thing that maybe wasn't mentioned is like, would like a technical skill be prioritized in a portfolio? And I would say no. We really value us being an interdisciplinary program, both in like the structure of our program, but also in our cohort. We have reviewers who come from all sorts of intersectional backgrounds, or interdisciplinary rather, backgrounds, and there's always more than one person who reviews an application. And so we really try to think about the balance and health of the cohort. So if there was a year, for example, we were getting suddenly a ton of folks from like technology, we do take that into consideration in terms of balancing the cohort. We don't really see necessarily having maybe a major that's a little bit less connected to UX UI isn't inherently like a bad thing. And in fact, it can be a real key highlight to your application. It's really, we think about the health of the cohort from many, many aspects as we're doing our application review. So I don't think you have to necessarily worry about whether or not you're being more technical or being more breadth versus depth is inherently a bad thing. It's more about thinking like through the questions of the statement of purpose and really trying to make sure your materials are polished and that each material that you do submit is intentional and demonstrates like that story you're trying to share. So yeah, I don't think it's inherently like one element is better or worse than the other. It's more just about how is that piece of material relevant to the story you're trying to share in your your application. That's really great questions, y'all.
See any of these bubbling to the surface that we want to dive into?
Oh, I think Amelia had a
Estimated number of how many students apply each year. That's a relatively easy one to go for.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of demand for programs like this, so it's daunting to hear, but we expect somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 to 1,000 applications. That's where it's been the last few years. So that's about the size of the applicant pool. It's pretty big for a program, again, of 40 some students. That's probably what we're going to be seeing again this year.
I wanted to go to Brandon, who has his hand raised, and then we can grab some questions off the chat, if that's okay, Matt.
Absolutely. Let's go, Brandon. You're up.
Hello, hi everyone. Thank you for taking the time to explain everything. I actually think someone just asked the same question I was wondering about, but I was wondering if there's any overlap between the HCDE program. I know the main difference is like the cohort model, and that's something that's pretty integral, it sounds like. But if there was anything else that you might feel like a student might fit better in one program versus the other.
That's a good question. I think I think you can probably get some opinions from all of us on this. The cohort model style and the studio style is definitely a big difference. The interdisciplinarity of our program, I think, is a difference as well, that a lot of the topics covered are going to be similar, but the way that we prioritize approaching it in MHCID is we think that it's valuable in a professional program to get different lenses to look at the same area. So we think it's valuable to have folks who are working in industry, folks who come from more of an art background, folks that come from computer science, as well as human-centered design and engineering in the information school. We think it's valuable to be exposed to all those different lenses when approaching the problem. That interdisciplinarity, I think, is really core difference. The experience you'll have as an HCDE student will be focused, like the individual classes will often cover similar areas, but you won't have that experience of walking through a lot of the same topics with that same cohort throughout it. So I think that shades the way that you work on it. It's sort of a different experience to each quarter be brought together with a different group of students. Some of the topic areas, there are shades of difference. I think there's a little more focus on the academic and the research side in HCDE, and a little more focus on the design side and industry in MHCI+D. However, I think that those differences can sometimes be overstated. I think both programs are excellent programs for getting into a professional career trajectory. You can do awesome in the HCDE program. We obviously think you can do awesome going through our program as well. But the differences are kind of shades in my mind beyond that, and that difference of like the cohort experience versus the large program experience. Any other thoughts from Anna, Michelle, or students in here? Want to chime in on this?
I think you
Um,
just did it.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
No, yeah, I was to say it's pretty good. Yeah, I think, I think that even sometimes the comparisons, there are some maybe like more like the minutia and the curriculum. And I do think like bringing up that cohort versus like evening part-time opportunities is like another thing, a program that can be a 2+ year program. And sometimes in this like looking at graduate programs, sometimes it's really reflecting on your values and your needs. Do you need to work full-time? Would you prefer evening coursework? Do you prefer a part-time model? Those are also, I think, big distinctions, and I think not unimportant distinctions as well. So I just want to say, like, that's a very, I think, important thing to consider as well. Even if you're like, oh, curriculum is similar, it's, I think those sort of the experience of are different, and it's more about the question of fit at that point. Like, is it a better fit for us? Like, are you more of like an evening part-time person, or would you prefer a cohort style?
Why
Awesome.
don't we take
Thank you, guys.
another question in here? Morgan, you got your hand up? Howdy.
Yes. Hi, thank you so much for holding this info session tonight. I wanted to ask about how this program approaches and prepares. Oh my gosh, I'm seeing that my camera is acting up. Apologies for that.
No worries.
But I'm curious about how this program approaches and prepares students for the dissonance that exists in a lot of the real world. There's a lot of awesome stuff and people doing a lot of awesome things with a lot of awesome values. Not everyone, and every space in the world aligns in those values that this program has, that I align with myself. And I'm curious how this program approaches and guides students in how to navigate that, how to understand their position and power, and how to use their knowledge that the program gives in these sometimes imbalanced and funky situations to be productive, but also to do good things and knowing kind of when to use them. Or if this program approaches that outside of the perfect academic studios and situations that are really great for learning a lot of the sides of the problems, but don't always map in the same way to the real world situations that we'll hopefully find ourselves in.
I'd love to take that if that's okay.
You're on, Anna.
Thank you. Morgan, thank you so much. That is such a fantastic question, and I'm glad you asked it because I don't want there to be, I guess, a couple of things. All academic environments are flawed in some way. They're just imperfect spaces. And I think the fact that they're imperfect is almost what makes them effective, right? Because we're here not to deliver the ideal education about some idealized and perfect world, which by the way doesn't exist, right? But really to help students prepare for engaging the rough and tumble of the real world. And oh, by the way, academy is also the real world, right? It's just a different setting. We do a lot of work with industry instructors and do a lot of field trips, have a lot of speakers come and connect with our students. I myself have a 30-year career in industry. I have been in rooms and spaces and places and argued and burnt bonfires of social capital around, you know, advocacy and pushing the needle and trying to do the right thing. I have friends who have led social movements. I have friends who have stayed engaged and positioned their protest as being inside the organization and trying to affect change from within. There is no wrong answer, right? We're all necessary and we all have different opportunities at different times. We have different skills, different superpowers, different lessons to learn. What is important is that we're engaged. That's what's important, and that we're willing to be wrong passionately, right? Like, it's so important to care, and it's so important to be engaged and to try to make a solution correct. And only in so doing do we realize how difficult it actually is, right? And so it's easy to critique from the outside. It's a lot more interesting when you're in the middle of it and you're trying to navigate what doing the right thing means. And you're faced with complexity and choices, ethical choices, moral choices, personal choices. And again, everybody's in different circumstances. I think one of the least productive things that we could do is to create heroes out of people. You know, we're all just, my community of practice, both within the University of Washington and more broadly, are really populated by people who care very, very much and would probably reiterate what I'm saying, which is stay at the table, be engaged, do the work, stay in conversation and make things. And in so doing, you will affect change and begin to bend that arc of opportunity. And again, there's so many different positions you can take. You can fight the good fight within a corporate setting. You could decide to try your hand at a startup and be an entrepreneur and understand the different landscape of opportunity that and the different choices that entails. So we try to expose students to a number of different voices and stories and case studies to, again, give you skills and perspectives that help you be productive regardless of the setting that you find yourself in. I hope that's a helpful answer.
It is. Thank you so much for such a thoughtful answer. I appreciate that it isn't super limiting and not a uniform approach, and the value of those varied and valuable in their own ways approaches.
Absolutely. I mean, in discourse last year, we had such a range of speakers and they really exemplified everything I was saying, like occupying different spaces, and there is no one right answer, right? And so thank you. It's a great question. Appreciate it very much.
Cynthia, I think you've had your hand up for a while. Wanted to get to a couple more questions here.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you firstly for taking the time to speak with us. I know you're all very busy, but I just wanted to, just thank everyone for their time. My question's more for the current cohort, and there's kind of it's like two layers, but I was wondering what you're looking forward to most about this program and what you're looking forward to, I guess, on the other side of the tunnel when you're done.
Excellent questions. Who'd like to start? Thanks for those questions, Cynthia.
I could start, and maybe Sophia, Ainsley, Christian, you can chime in between. I think for this year, definitely learning from my fellow cohort people. And also, as I said, this course is very fast paced and also very rich with resources. So I research not just within the MHCID, but also from other departments and all the UW resources. So I'm looking forward to exploring on those aspects, because that exploring those areas will open new opportunities, I believe. And I think the other question was what I'm looking for at the end of after this program. I'm not so sure if that's like my career direction, but or is it like a more of a what kind of person I want to be, maybe?
Wild card, you could do either one.
Okay, so just because my background's in the data analytics and more of the cloud area, I am hoping that I could be a product designer in the fields of those product areas. But coming here and getting all these opportunities to sit into new fields of new industries and everything, that might change. I don't know how it's going to change, but still in the process of exploring and figuring out. Yeah.
I can go next. In terms of like where I see myself after the program, I'm hoping to focus on accessibility within the field of product design. But at the same time, I think one thing that I'm telling myself in this program is to really open my mind and explore all of the different fields and topics that I'm learning about throughout this program. So that's one thing I hope to really continue throughout this year, is like have an open mind and really absorb all of the different information that I'm learning with this program. And yeah.
I can go next. I think for me, a big motivation was to gain confidence as a designer, not only just in my skills, but my thinking. I think being able to work in a team, defend your design decisions, being able to just not just be someone who executes a design, but have a strong design vision. That's what I'm looking for in the program, and I think I am slowly building my way towards it. I think the projects give you the opportunity to talk to people who are also strong designers or like trying to be strong designers, so you find your own feet. And at the end of the tunnel, obviously, I want to have a great job, and be a great designer, but I'm keeping that open. I don't want to like pigeonhole myself in a certain industry right now.
I second everything that Ainsley said. I think gaining confidence as a designer is one of my main goals that I'm looking forward to, both in the short term with completing this program, but also in the long term, because I know that your learning is never done after you graduate. But I'm very confident that all of us at the cohort will be like very well equipped to continue like careers in design or research or project management, whatever it may be. Even outside, and I think at the end of the tunnel, even outside of like interests, I'm not even particularly sure what kind of role I'm looking for, which I think is somewhat frightening, but also exciting. I think I'm trying to be as open-minded as possible, both in terms of like niche and in terms of role, because I think this program offers such a comprehensive experience in terms of what you can practice as a designer and as a researcher.
It's awesome. Thank you all. Amelia, you had your hand up for a long while. Do you still have a question you want to squeeze in before we run out of time here?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm a little worried that it might be loud, so let me know if no one can hear me. But Sophia actually did a little mini response. I was wondering about if any current students have any specific niches they're hoping to focus on in the future, but specifically how the cohort style impacts your ability to narrow in on those topics. So if anyone else has anything, but me and Sophia have the same interests, so that's ironic.
So there's a broad trend. I'll vamp for a little while everybody's thinking that I think it's great to have niches and to figure out what those are as you go through the year if you don't come in with those. But also, like, a great way to be an expert in one of those niches is to become an expert in that full process as well, to strengthen your ability to approach all elements of design and research can only help to make you stronger in that specialty that you have. That's a lot of, like, we get sometimes students getting tired of saying, you know, I have to go through the design process again. I know what I want to do. That repetition, that iteration really strengthens your muscles to allow you to then apply them to this new area and space that you're going into. So part of what we're doing is problematizing design by asking those tough questions and helping you to think through how you're going to approach those tough questions, as that earlier question raised. But part of it is like building up your strengths in all aspects so that you're able to focus on those niche areas.
I can go quickly. A niche area that I wasn't expecting to find in this program, but I come from a music background. Specifically, I've done a lot of work with sound engineering, and one of the main instructors is Chris Seifert, who is the lead designer for the Amazon Alexa and has like an insane amount of experience, not just with like different like forms of design outside of like the traditional UI, but like he used to work as a sound engineer in like a previous life, so, or previous career life. I think one thing that's really excited about exploring that niche is that he teaches advanced interfaces, I believe, in the spring, which will give a lot of room to get very technical in the work that he does and the work that he thinks is valuable for us to not just explore sound design, but he keeps on repeating this idea of like being multimodal. So just, yeah, having different professors like that all have their like specialty or work in industry, I think is a great way that like students can find different interests, talk to them about it, see what like work they're up to and how it can reflect in the projects that they do in studio.
Awesome. Thank you. I want to be mindful of time. I know a lot of our students are about to run off to a class before too long or get back to their ideation projects, if not. We've gone over the 5:30 ending period for this, so I think I want to call this to a close. First and foremost, Christian, Sophia, Ainsley, Jay, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your experience and giving an insight into sort of what it looks like on the ground here. Michelle, Anna, and I really enjoyed talking with y'all. Thank you, everybody who stayed through this whole session at whatever time zone you happen to be in. I hope it was a worthwhile first introduction to what we're thinking we're doing in this program. And I'd encourage you to follow up with questions if you have them. You can reach us at MHCID@uw.edu. That's the easiest entry portal to start talking with us. Christian also shared his email in chat, so if you want to grab that from the chat beforehand. But MHCID@uw.edu, that's a great place to email with questions as you go through the application process. Thanks, everyone. It's been great talking with you, and I hope you have a good rest of the evening. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And for those of you who are in Seattle, it's so nice outside. Please go out and enjoy the sun.
Good idea.
Definitely.
Bye. Thank you.
Take care, all.